Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to use Google Forms to create your online survey. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm already in my Google Drive, so keep that in mind. I would recommend using Google Chrome. I've had less issues with it, so that's my recommendation, regardless of whether you're on a Mac or a Windows machine. So the first thing we're going to do is click on New, go to More, and then Google Forms. And this is going to start your Google form, right? So you're going to have three main sections to include. Actually, it's going to be um, four main sections for most studies. It depends on your study. We're going to make this first section the consent form. So you could title it what you want. You could title it the name of your study, but the main thing to remember is that this first section is your consent form. And in this section here where it says form description, you want to paste your consent form text. So I have all these documents open. Let me look for my consent form over here. Now, right now I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm not going to worry about the formatting too much. Yes, the formatting is going to look funky. You're going to see it now. But you know what? That's fine to get started. Once you have it in here, definitely go through it and make it readable, right? You see me spacing, right? Fix the spacing to make it something that can be easily read. So once you go through that, you're going to have this one question in this section. Do you agree to participate in this study? Or do you consent? You'll notice here you get all these options. You don't want all these options because you don't want maybe. But just to simplify it, I'm going to put at all, and I'm going to delete the maybe option. Okay, so another thing you want to make sure you enable is that you require this question, so people can't just skip this question. Because if you don't enable this and you don't require it, people can just go to the next section without answering yes or no. Now I'm going to create the other sections. 3, 4, and actually a fifth section. You'll see what the fifth section is for in a bit. I'm going to label it now. Survey. Math questions. So you would just label it survey, or if you had, instead of a survey, you had math questions for the main section of your study, then you would call it math questions. Whatever this is going to vary based on your study. So make sure you label this appropriately. You don't want to give away your hypothesis by the way you label it, because the participants will be able to see this. So keep that in mind. You have that. You have the demographic questions. And you have the brief form. And the final section, the fifth section, is you chose not to participate. And you'll see how this works in a bit. So you're going to have the consent form first. Let me actually enlarge this. The consent form. Then you're going to have the main part of your study. Whatever your DV is would go in the second section. I like to put the demographic questions in the third section that follows the main focus of the study, right? Your questions that get at the DV, mostly because that allows or minimizes the impact of the demographic questions. Because if you had these first, they might anticipate what you're looking for, and that might influence how they respond. So for example, if you're interested in something related to gender and you ask for the participants' gender before they answer your scale and respond to your survey, they might assume, okay, it looks like they're looking at gender. I know what they're looking for, and that might influence how they're responding to your survey. So I always like to put this in after your main measure of the DV. And then here you have the debrief section where you tell the participants what you hypothesize, what you were actually looking for, and you give them any contact, or you give them contact information if they would like to follow up with you or follow up with me if they had any issues with the study. And this section is where the participants are going to be sent if they decide not to participate. Oftentimes this is by accident, but just to make sure we're covered, we have to make sure we add this question. So I'm actually going to modify this. I know I'm going to make this actually a double-barreled question. You'll see why. Are you 18 years or older? And do you consent to participate in the study? I'm combining this mostly because I want to make sure they're 18 or older. I want to make sure you all don't accidentally recruit some minors into the study. If they're younger, we can't use them. You could separate this out. It'll simplify it if you just have it as one question. Usually you want to avoid this, but we'll be okay with this for now, for this study. Now, another thing you want to enable, so you see here, you want to click on these three dots, and you want to click on this option. Again, go to section based on answer. If they say yes, I want them to continue on to the next section. But if they answer no, I don't want them to go to the next section. So that's why I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go to the fifth section, right? You chose not to participate. So let me actually edit that now. You decided not to participate in the study. If this was an accident, please select back in your browser, or something to that effect, right? So that way, if they click this option, if they click no, they won't be allowed to continue with the study. And from here, they'll be sent to the end of the study. Now, for this debrief section, just because the way Google Forms is built, it'll just move from section to section. You also want to change it let's see. Oh, here it goes. So you see below here it says after section 4, continue to next section. I don't want that. I actually want to submit form, right? So after they finish this section, they click next. It should submit the form. And since I'm here now, let me go ahead and get my text from the debrief form. Where do I have that? I have it here. And keep in mind, for the consent and debrief form, you have all these blanks, all this text highlighted blue. You should make sure you update this to match your study information. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. This one should look a little bit nicer than the other one, right? You can see here. Maybe I'll add a space there. And maybe I'll add a message. Please click on next to submit your survey. Now, it'll record their response even if they don't, I believe, but it's nice to have that in there just to make sure they know to completely finish. You don't have to worry about experiment number, so we can actually remove that. And that's your debrief page. So keep in mind all these changes I made. I directed people who said no, who did not give consent, to this section that says you chose not to participate. For the debrief form, I changed this to submit form. And now let's continue on with the survey. Okay, so now that we have that set up, we can go on with the main focus. here I'm going to put a short description. Please read through the following statements and choose the answer that fits best with that best reflects your view. It depends on the questions you're asking, right? You might say best reflects your view, best reflects your experience, your attitude. Depending on what you're asking, modify this to reflect that. Now, this would be for a scale. If it was a set of math questions, you would say something to the effect of, please take 2 minutes or whatever you decided on to do as many of the following math problems as you can, right? Now let me move this over so I can pull over one of the scales. So in this scale, I'm focusing on, let me do respect for family. So here you have 6 questions. So I'm going to add, let me expand this a bit. There you go. So I'm going to add 6 questions. I'm actually going to recommend not using multiple choice, and instead of using linear scale, it is from 1 to 5. So actually, I might add up here. You might decide to paste an image, which you can do. Let's see. 1, not important. 2, 3, somewhat important. 4, and 5, very important. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, it does not look good. I would say use an image instead. Include an image of this box so they can reference that when they're filling out these options. But you can still add at least the extremes here. As you can see, I labeled the 1 value and the 5 value of the scale. Now the question for the first one, actually, I should paste this. No. Actually, I'm going to modify this a bit more. Using the following scale. And here's where I would paste the image. And then I'd say in general, how important is it to you that you I'm going to add that here. And that's the first question. And I'll do the second one. Actually, change it to linear scale. Not at all important. Very important. Actually, I want to keep the capitalization the same. And that's your second question. And you would add all the questions. Now that I'm looking at this, right, as you're designing this, see if you think there's a better way to design it. So for example, here I might say, in general, I feel it is important to treat my parents with great respect. So if you want to make some slight modifications like this one to make it easier to read, more understandable in this format, that's fine with me. In this case, I would remove this, right? because I don't need that part, and I would just modify all my questions to make sense without that statement. And you would have all of those for this section, all 6 of these questions. Or if you're doing current assistance scale or harassment scale, you would have all those questions for this section. Then my demographic questions. We would also like to ask you a few questions, please answer the following demographic questions. You can keep it simple like that. You don't need to write a paragraph or anything. So let me close this now. Let me close that. I can close this. I'll actually get back to that in a second. Demographic questions. So make sure you add these options as well, all these questions in your demographic section. And I do want you to include all of these questions, even if you're not focusing on that in your study. You need to do age, you need to do ethnicity, race, gender, and a question about what are you studying, so major. So let me go ahead and add this. I'll have to do this one short answer, so it could be open-ended. I'm going to modify it a bit. Get rid of the blank. And then that's my question. It should save in a little bit and update. There you go. Now, keep in mind, okay. So you can't require them. They can skip. But if there are questions that are required, you would click required. I'll point that out. I do want you to not require your demographic questions, just because I do want them to have the option to skip any question they feel uncomfortable answering. So you would have all your demographic questions here. This would be open-ended. Age would be open-ended. Race would be open-ended. Gender would be open-ended. Actually, gender, I'm okay if you do something like male, female, non-cis, or or not non, but LGBTQ or something like that. I don't want to leave this option open, so I actually use open-ended just to let people identify how they identify. But I'm okay if you use fixed choices for gender. For race and ethnicity, I do want you to keep it open. You'll see why later. And you all are going to have this section. Now, for those of you doing different type of studies, you're going to have to modify this section, section 2, right? So if you're using Google Forms to do the math option, please try to complete as many questions as possible. And in that case, I would actually do multiple choice. I'm going to close that. I'm going to copy the actual problem. You don't copy the one, you don't need that. Please read through the questions and answer as many as you can solve. Now, if you're doing it online, it will be difficult to time people, but you might say, please start a timer and do as many as you can solve in 2 minutes. And when you're done, click next. You're going to have to rely on the participant being honest in that situation, or you can just give them all the problems and just see how many they get correct out of all the questions. So let me click on this again. The answer for this is listed here. It's 6. You could have different options. I don't know, plausible options. So here it gave me these options. Maybe I'll change one to 6. and then you'll get everybody's response, and you can go through each participant that answered correctly and give them a point. Now, this is the best option of these. You can do a drop down as well. Let me show you how that would look. Okay, let me click out of it. So let me actually show you how it would look. So if you click here, it'll show you a preview, what it looks like to the participant. You can test it out. Let me try this out. I click no. Good, right? It sent me to that part. Click back. Actually do want to do it, and I am over 18 or 18 and over. This is how the drop down looks. This is how that previous option I showed you looks. It looks pretty good. But for the math one, you could do either one. Okay, now let me close this. Also, keep in mind, this link, that's not what you want to send to people. That's not how you share this form with people either. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So let me close that, leave. Okay, to send your survey to people, you click on send. Click on the link icon. I always shorten it. And this is a link you can send for participants, to participants. This is the link they would click on and then complete your survey. If you want to share it, there you go. You click on these three dots, you click on add collaborators, and then you add their email. Right, you add their email here or give them this link. Let me make sure there isn't anything else I'm missing. No, so this is pretty much the base. These are the basics. Just remember the main thing to enable, let's see, is the consent question has to block them from proceeding if they click on no. It should take into that section at the end. The yes one should follow through. Demographics after your measure of the DV, right, which is section 2. The debrief form, some reminder that they need to click on submit. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, yes, I agree. I'm gonna choose this answer and then this answer next. Chicano, next. There you go. You click submit, and they're done. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And keep in mind, when you share this with me, you cannot just copy and paste this link. You have to either click on send or add me as a collaborator. So please keep that in mind. If you add me as a collaborator, instead of using my CSUN email, please use my Gmail instead. Same thing without a period, but at gmail.com. Let me know if you have any questions.